and welcome to Rolling with Two. I'm Will, and with me as always is the build-bagging beauty herself,
Sarah.
And today we're looking at the Kickstarter version of Meeples Monsters. Sarah, tell us a bit about this game.
All right. With plenty of meeple humor, Meeples Monsters is a bag building, worker placement, and meeple modifying game of growing your army of meeples, fighting monsters, and completing quests to score the most victory points and win. All right, Will, so how does the game change for two players?
So if you're playing a two-player game, or even a one-player game, you remove the cards that say 3+, and those are mostly going to... Those are all on the monster.
It's just the monster cards.
Those are all on the monster cards. Once you remove those, then you can set up the game as normal, play as it is. And there is no Meeple Banana Bot, so goodbye.
All right, so let's look at some issues for the two-player experience.
It's long.
It's long, yeah.
The time on the box says 30 to 45 minutes. However, this game moves forward based on how players quickly attack monsters.
Yeah.
And so it's completely player-driven. Because of that fact, two players is the slowest way I've seen is played. So expect 2 to maybe even 3 times the amount of time that the box recommends.
And if you have a tendency to turtle, and both players have a tendency to turtle, then it will go even longer. Now, that's not to say it's a bad experience, but it is something that could be negative, especially considering how fast the game probably would take if you're playing with 3 or 4 players. This game just goes at the speed of the players, and the fact that you have to go through the whole deck, and even taking out the 3+ player cards, it's only like 6 or so cards. It's really not a lot. So the deck of monsters is your timer for the game. You have to get through all of those, the whole deck. So it's going to take you time to build up your army to be able to defeat monsters. You might be able to defeat the first level of monsters relatively quickly, but then it jumps. When you go to the second level, you need a lot more power. So you need a bigger army. So it can take a while.
So strap yourself in for a rather long gameplay, despite how much they say it should take.
Right.
But that's about it.
That actually was the only real issue we just were not expecting.
Yeah.
For it to take that long.
Yeah.
So what it does well, so on the flip side of the game taking so long, you have more influence over the town, how the town is built. Because the first part of the game is players, for the most part, adding tiles to the town, which adds action spaces. In a 2-player game, you have the potential to influence half of the tiles that go out.
Yeah, there are 8 spaces regardless of the player count. So with playing going back and forth, that means on average 2 players will choose 4 of those action tiles. Plus, since you have a longer period of time to play, that does mean that the ways you beef up your meeples, you're just going to have stronger meeples in the end.
Right.
Which means that 2 players are also going to see higher scores. They're going to see more depth in the game.
Right. You're going to fight more monsters, or you're going to fight more of the monsters. Again, the deck is static. I mean, yes, if you're playing 3 or 4 players, you get those 6 monsters back in, or 8, or something like that. But in those higher player counts, other people are going to fight the monsters. Just like the town tiles, you're going to fight about half the monsters. Not exactly. But a lot of those monsters give you permanent boosts. When you put these meeple types together, or all of this color gets a +1. And so you're going to have a really beefy army by the end of the game when compared to a 3 or 4 player game where those are spread out more.
Yes. AEG calls it engine building. We call it meeple modification because what happens is you'll get this particular ability and it makes these colored meeples that much stronger against this situation, or when it happens that it's combined with this other color, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's not engine building in the normal, or the sense that most people are expecting. You are modifying the meeples so that they do work better in certain situations. So that's where I can kind of see they get the engine building from.
All right. But otherwise, it does a really good job at a lot of game. A whole lot of game. More game than most when it comes to a 2-player. experience.
You really, for the long game that you get your game.
Yes.
It's really, well, we'll get to that in the review video.
All right, accessibility.
Yes, accessibility. So there's a few things. There is a slight cognitive overload when you're first learning all the iconography. And that's just because there are some nuances. There's some tiles where this is the only tile that this ability shows up, but they do a wonderful job on the back of the rule book. It is all laid out. Even those one-time instances are all detailed in the reference sheet or the reference on the back of the rules. And it's great. So just warning you, there will be a slight overload, but then again, there usually is when you're trying to learn icons anyway. But it is only slightly an issue in that if you're playing with multiple people, you might have to pass the rule book around.
Yeah, I mean, there are 9 different colors of meeples in here. You got your corruption, you got your peasants, you got your clerics, you've got your wizards, you've got your warriors, you've got your knights, you've got your shamans, you've got your rangers, and you've got your paladins. That's just that's right from the start, a lot to take in.
It is a lot to take in, although those 3 specialty ones, the
paladins, shamans, and rangers,
will not necessarily
be in your game.
Yeah, they may not come in your game. One may come, one may not. You might be able to get one through a quest, but those are special ones that only come out en masse with a tile, and that being 3 of them. So if anything, that's also a benefit on a 2-player game. You have access to more of the specialty meeples. But so
cognitive, bit heavy,
just a bit
for learning.
Yep. Now the quest cards are meant to be kept secret. So if you want to keep them secret and you have more severe vision issues like what Will does, you'll need some sort of assistive device or somebody else helping you, somebody outside the game. However, we played them open-handed, and even though I read every single one of Will's quest cards to him, there wasn't anything I could really do to stop him. Plus, there's so much I'm trying to focus on, because if you don't get your quest cards done by the end of the game, you get negative points. So you're going to be focusing on what you need to do, not bothering about what someone else can do.
Yeah, blocking someone else doesn't really happen in this game.
No.
Because you'll take your turn, do all your actions, take all of them back, essentially clearing them off. There's only a couple instances where some of your meeples stay on for those particular actions, and those are the ones you fight over. It doesn't lend itself to a very head-to-head competition.
Right.
It's a more, can I do this better than you can sort of experience. So I think the reason why they're kept secret is there's already enough of a cognitive load on the game that you don't need to throw in, well, what do you have for quests as an added layer? Because it doesn't help anybody except the player that has the quests.
Right. It's not going to really matter one way or the other. And we had really close scores in our games, so it really didn't come down to the quests in terms of me knowing what he had.
Yeah. So play him open-handed.
Yeah,
it'll
be
work.
Fine. So on vision accessibility, the orange meeples are very close to the yellow. I'm nearsighted. I got them confused. They're just a really close shade when you're looking at a glance. So we are looking at the Kickstarter edition here. One side of the meeples is printed with an actual character. It's very detailed. So you could use keep the orange meeples all their printed side up and keep all the yellows with the yellow side up, because the printing is not distinct enough that at a glance you can tell the one printed side from another, except maybe the knights because they're in all black armor, and I think the reds are in they're the mages, so they're in the
clerks.
Clerics. I always get that mixed up.
Yeah, yellow or wizards.
Right. So the red are like in robes, so it's anyways, the printing
Maybe put the wizards down so the yellow's up and then the shamans face up.
Right. So
you can play with it.
So what we're trying to say is if you have the printed meeples, you can play with using which side is printed up and which side is color up for helping you differentiate. Now, when it comes to the quest cards, though, they're all color because the cards are meant to be in both the retail and the Kickstarter edition. So you're not going to have any printed sides on the quest cards.
Yeah,
so,
for the base game.
Yeah.
Or take some of your own paint or Sharpie and do what you need to do to make them accessible for you.
Right.
But just know that you can see, and Sarah laid out all the different color meeples so that if you have other colorblind issues, maybe you have a red and something else, you can look at the screen, figure out how much of an impact that's going to be for you.
Right. Otherwise, I think that was pretty it for challenges on for accessibility challenges.
Yes.
So what it does right accessibility wise is just going back to that rule book. It is clear, it's well laid out. You've got the reference on the back. We didn't have any problems learning how to play the game. And yeah, your first couple games, you might be referencing the back of the rule book quite a bit. But I think after that, you're going to pick it up pretty quick.
Yes. So for 2 players, would you recommend this?
I would, as long as you're okay with a longer game, but just know that longer game is going to come with more game. I mean, it's going to be meatier for you than a higher player count experience.
Yeah, same. You're picking this up. If you're picking this up as a 2-player game, expect a medium weight, long runtime.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking somewhere in the neighborhood of an hour and a half to 2.5 hours, depending on your speed and preference to turtling or not.
I turtle, so we tend to go slower. And then I have to read Will his cards, so we generally take on the longer end of things.
Yeah, but even without vision accessibility, it is just going to take you a bit longer.
Yep, agreed.
So 2-player, keep that in mind. Accessibility.
Yes, again, you'll have to take a look if you do have some colorblind issues. The retail copy will probably be the most challenging, but on the other hand, like Will said, you could take paint or a Sharpie to, like the orange one, since there's only like 4?
6.
6. Sorry. There are 6 of the orange ones. You could put a little dot on either side of the orange ones so you know those are the shamans. So there are ways that you can also slightly, modify them yourself to make them even more accessible.
Yeah, I will say the Kickstarter edition does give you a few options straight out of the box for accessibility. But for the most part, aside from the color issues with the quest cards, I feel is the most accessibility issue here. Otherwise, it's fairly accessible.
Agreed.
Because you're not going to be dealing with all your meeples all at once. It's a handful of meeples at a time.
Yep.
So keep that in mind. Well, that will do it for us here at Rolling with Two. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can reach us on the various social media platforms at
Rolling with Two. That's TWO. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And on YouTube, please like and subscribe.
And why would you ever meeple with just one when you can be Rolling with Two?